Hi everyone, my name is Selam Abebe, and I'm a graduate student at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. I'm the project coordinator and host for this podcast, Kümneger Talks. Today's podcast will be an introduction to our first series based on Dr. Goitom's research regarding Ethiopian and Eritrean youth experiences and well-being in Canada. This podcast is named Kümneger Talks because we wanted to create a safe space to discuss important topics relating to Ethiopian and Eritrean diaspora experiences. Kümneger meaning serious or something of value talks in Amharic. So before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that this has all been made possible by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. So now let's get into the introduction of the rest of the research team. I have here today Dr. Mary Goitom and Dr. Nassisse Solomon, who I've worked closely on this project with. So Dr. Mary Goitom is an associate professor at the School of Social Work and the graduate program director of the Development Studies program at York University in Toronto. Dr. Goitom's research explores migration, mobilities, diasporic connections, transnational processes, and social relations. Her work is centered on community-based research and is grounded in Ethiopian epistemologies and larger African traditional knowledge systems. Dr. Goitom's work explores the nexus of identity and futurities, imagined world buildings, transnational social fields in relation to the constitution of settlement, citizenship, well-being, agency, and resilience. But I know her as Mary. So hi, Mary. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, Selam. Thank you. I'm doing well. And yourself?
I'm doing good. We also have Dr. Solomon here. So Dr. Nassisse Solomon is a PhD graduate with a degree in history and a specialization in migration and ethnic relations from Western University. Nassisse is currently working as a program coordinator for global health systems at Western University in London, Ontario. Her research explores migration and ethnic relations in Canadian history with a particular focus on Ethiopian, Canadian, and Canadian-African relations. So I also know her simply as Nassisse. Nassisse, how are you doing?
I'm great, Selam. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great. It's so funny that we're having this conversation here, but I'm so happy that we're all here together.
Me too. Me too. This is good company.
Yes, I agree. So Mary, tell us a bit about how you got started on this project.
Great question, Selam. So I will give you the abridged version of it. The purpose of the study was to explore how second-generation Ethiopian and Eritrean youth identities are formed in what is termed hybridity, which is a state of being in between a multicultural society like Canada and their ancestral transnational cultures, all of which is made sense within the confines of this cosmopolitan perspective. So the research is motivated by the need to expand our current presentation, theoretical framing, and practice on identity, settlement, belonging, citizenship, and well-being. With the increasing nature of global human movement, settlement and integration work has an impact on how social work, my discipline, gets practiced. As such, it's increasingly the case that social work programs and organizations alike that are not explicitly geared toward, say, cross-border interrelationships are nevertheless facing transnational challenges. So you can think about social work practice with youth, social practice with children and seniors, and so on and so forth. This invariably has implications for Ethiopian and Eritrean youth, among perhaps others, who get lumped into simplistic discourses of quote unquote integration without considering or exploring the uniqueness of theirs and others like them experiences, especially because they are indeed Canadian born. So that's the abridged version in essence.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And
You're
just
welcome.
let our listeners know we're having this conversation over Zoom. So apologies if you hear some background noise, but the information is gold. So shortly after Mary created this study, she invited me to work on this project with her as a project coordinator to help recruit and gather participants to this research. And shortly after, we have Nassisse who entered this project. So what about you, Nassisse? How did you get involved into this project?
The truth be told, Mary and I had connected some time ago, and I was kindly invited to participate in this project by Mary, primarily because our research interests intersected. I started my PhD project with hopes of looking at oral histories in Canadian society, and this project built upon that pre-existing interest in identity formation in Canadian society.
So once we all got together, we were able to dive into this research project. So the way this research unfolded was that we recruited about 40 participants and we interviewed them in 2021 during COVID. So all of these conversations took place remotely via Zoom, but it was great because we had accessibility to people all over Canada, identifying both men, women, coming from different backgrounds. So we had a lot of excitement and interest in these conversations. And the conversations with these participants ranged from well-being, race, what it means to be Canadian, what it means to be Eritrean, Ethiopian, Habesha, transnational connections, and a whole host of other topics. And about a year later, after analyzing the research, we reconnected with our participants to present the findings to them. And then we brainstormed with them to see what would be the best way to disseminate the findings of the research to the community. And it was out of these discussions that we had the idea to create a podcast. And that's how Kümneger Talks was born. So for us, this is a very, very important project because it's driven by the framework of for the community, by the community. Everybody who's involved is Ethiopian, Eritrean, Habesha identifying, and it was such a special thing to be a part of this project.
I agree. You've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, the findings were rich, in-depth, and interconnected. And I mean, based on the themes that we drew from the findings, we presented discussion points in our focus group sessions with all of the research participants. And these focus group discussions were rich. You captured it really well in your introduction there, because it was clear that the participants were really passionate about all of the findings that were presented to them, and they wanted to talk more about those topics. And when we solicited feedback on what would constitute a meaningful way to bring this information back to the community, you're right, there was a resounding agreement among all of us, including the research team, that the overarching findings had to be widely accessible, right? And podcasts were a great way of ensuring that the information was out beyond the Canadian academia.
Agreed. So podcasts then naturally emerge as the obvious mechanism for delivering these results. And for starting a broader conversation with people globally, we worked with our participants to decide what we as a community are not talking about and should be talking about. So we present the series as a primer for further discussions.
Sounds interesting. So I'm sure this is piquing a lot of people's interest as to what these discussions might entail, but continue listening, everyone. So just to ask this one question before we wrap up, what does being a part of this research mean to you? I know it's funny coming from me to ask you, Mary, first, because it was birthed from you at first. But what does it mean to be a part of this research, working with all of these participants and with the research team, and how has it impacted you?
This is such a huge question, a really, really huge question. And I honestly don't even know how to begin to unpack it to be able to respond to it in a very systematic, fulsome kind of way. But then also it's because I'm still in that moment and that feeling where I'm still uncovering on a day-to-day basis what this experience has been. But I think, a word that I would use to describe what this experience has been like has been grateful. I have a great sense of that feeling. You can always think about an idea of what it is that you want to research and think that you're ready. But, being open to experiences and being open to research is allowing the community to also drive where this should go and the kinds of conversations we should have. So for me, I'm super, super grateful and incredibly humbled by how, the response that we've received, Selam. I mean, you remember our emails, our inbox were always full with people willing and able and interested and excited to participate. And it's not just that, it's the fact that they were also quite authentic and organic and honest in their reflections and engagement with us in these interviews. For our listeners, our interviews ranged minimum 2.5 hours. And I think one of our longest interviews was 5 hours long, if you could imagine. So we really, 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 really had very in-depth and rich discussions. And so I take that with me everywhere I go. So in that sense, I think probably in the most inarticulate way that I'm speaking now to really try to articulate how I feel. Grateful is really the word that comes to mind, and a great sense of responsibility as well to want to do right by their narratives, their stories, their experiences, and wanting to ensure that this gets shared in a thoughtful and meaningful way so that people can also engage in these conversations from wherever they are globally. These are important conversations. And yeah, I think I'll stop here, Nassisse.
First and foremost, I'm going to say that was touching. And I love the way in which you captured the essence of what it felt like to be a part of this team and to be a part of this project overall. Because for me, I mean, it was a privilege, right? It was a privilege from day one to be able to share in these narratives, to be able to hear stories that resonated with me, that, sparked laughter, moments of contemplation, moments of reflection. There was something about this shared experience that it's hard to capture in words, but you felt it. And you felt it even more when we were doing, the discussions in the focus groups, right?
Yeah.
There were these silences we all understood. There were moments of laughter. You hear them erupt, spontaneously. And it's like, you get it. And sometimes we're muted, but we're laughing and crying in the background. And then there were other times where topics got serious and we were also sad and really reflective about things that, we may have encountered over time. So in a nutshell, this was an emotional, a professional, it was a development journey of all sorts, right? And I think it's a shared experience with all the people who have opened up their lives to us and given us the great privilege of being a part of their journey as well. So I really do hope that this is just a primer for more conversations to come, because the potential for this is just so great. Being a historian, I can tell you, like, the diaspora is now 40 years old, right? Over 40 years old. So when you start looking and thinking about the ways in which these conversations here are part of a bigger history, it really starts to sink in, how much of this has not been captured yet by academia, but also even in mainstream society. So privilege, that one word describes how I feel. Fortunate and privileged to be part of this group and work. Thank you.
How about you, Selam?
I completely agree with the both of you. Definitely a sense of privilege, responsibility, like great honor too, that people are so open and vulnerable with us, and also just really blessed because through this project I also gained 2 mentors as well, which are you guys. But I think it's almost not only, like Nassisse was saying, not only a professional developmental experience or development experience, but also almost like a familial one as well, because it makes you feel like, oh, these are people that have experienced something so similar to you. There's a lot of differences too, but your world almost just feels a little bit like nicer and warmer because you know that there's these faces and these people who have gone through something similar, and that we're all here and that we're all able to share and have these conversations honestly and openly. And it's a really beautiful thing. So it's been such an impactful part of my life. And I'm so excited for the rest of you all to hear about it. So we have just one last question for fun. We thought we'd bring it to one of our favorite topics, which is food. So everybody, what's your favorite Abebe dish?
Nassisse, you go first.
So what? 100%. It's my last meal before I die. I
Mr.
hope
What?
my kids are listening.
What is it?
Mr.
Mr. What?
Mr. What? Oh, okay. Very nice. I'm partial to shiro.
Mm,
All
I
the
like
way.
you.
That should never disappear from the face of this earth, along with berbere. I'm good with those two.
I'm
No.
actually more of a meat vita person. I like meat
That's
vita.
great.
I put it on everything, but favorite dish, I think as much as I try not to eat red meat, like kutfo is just,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
just up there. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of an unfair question if you really think about it, because it's like asking who your favorite sibling is or which one's your favorite parent, right? Like,
True.
it's an Ethiopian dish. It's like I'm having the full platter.
Yeah. Oh,
Vegan and non-vegan.
exactly.
True.
Very versatile food, can cater to a lot of things. But yeah, so I guess that's all the time we have for today. We really hope that you enjoyed listening to our introduction to Kümneger Talks podcast series. Thank you for joining us and excited to see you all next time. Take care.